Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Mod Madness. This time round, we're checking out a mod for Quake, a mod by the name of In the Shadows. Now, believe it or not, this is intended to be a stealth mod. I know it doesn't look much like one right now, what with all the shooting and the general lack of stealth, but trust me, it gets there eventually. It's just that it's more concerned with introducing you to the world and the backstory of where this mod takes place in before it introduces you to the mechanics, which, I gotta admit, did confuse me first time round. But if you're looking for the Cliff Notes version of what's going on here, it essentially boils down to King wanted a quite powerful relic in the form of a shield, and he decided the best way to do so was to make a deal with a demon. Naturally, that was a terrible idea. Anyway, the level eventually leads you down to where you can find the Amulet of Shadows, and thus begins the tutorial section in earnest. The Amulet of Shadows is pretty self-explanatory. It allows you to remain hidden if you're far away from an enemy, or if you're out of their line of sight, they won't have a clue. And to aid you in that endeavor, you'll find that there's a great big status eyeball above them that tells you how alert they may be. If you're good enough, you can sneak up on them, hit them, and kill them in one shot. Simple. The tutorial will also introduce you to the Crossbow, which isn't used for killing, but instead used for distraction. Like so. You can also add poison darts to your quiver, and this allows you to weaken bigger, badder enemies that normally wouldn't go down with the killing blow to the back, and you can also use that same poison dart to make certain enemies frenzied, attacking their allies, allowing you a crucial opportunity to take advantage. Bearing all this in mind, as you can imagine, patience is one of the biggest virtues you can have for playing this particular mod. It's essentially the antithesis to standard Quake gameplay. Interestingly, you may notice that there's actually ammo pickups and weapons littered around some of these levels, and it sticks out like a sore thumb when you consider the whole, point of the gameplay, which is being stealthy and using the axe to insta-kill people. But truth is, you can indeed completely ignore the amulet and just go ham, shooting your enemies in the face with the weaponry at hand. And I think that's included for a particular reason, and that's just if you're sick to death of actually trying to stealth through the level, because on normal difficulty, at the very least, you will actually find this pretty damn challenging. One of the main reasons for this is that the angle of attack you've got when it comes to that insta-kill has to be absolutely dead on. If you're a little outside that angle of attack when approaching an enemy from behind, they'll rumble you, they'll take a hell of a lot more hits to take down, and if you're really unlucky, they will go hunting for you once you run away. Another thing that'll compound the challenge somewhat on that front is if one enemy spots you, it does dispel the effect of the amulet, meaning that everyone can see you, and if they've got line of sight, they too will come running. It's at this particular point that the challenge of In the Shadows starts to veer somewhat into the realm of frustration, because despite the admirable simplicity of the mechanics here, the implementation can occasionally feel inconsistent. For example, an enemy in motion can't be distracted with a crossbow bolt. They'll just ignore it and carry on whatever patrol they were doing. You'll also find that trying to sneak up on a dog is really friggin' difficult. And that inevitably leads to a really clumsy attempt at hide and seek, where I'm desperately trying to stay out of line of sight of an enemy just long enough for my amulet to recharge. But even then, that's no guarantee you can continue, because enemies here are ridiculously tenacious. Basically, if you were to challenge me to use only one word to describe my experience of playing In the Shadows, I would describe it as painstaking. I mean, the sheer amount of effort you're going to have to put in just to get even halfway through this opening level here is exhausting. I mean, it may not look like that's the case going by the footage here, but you have to remember that I'm cherry-picking this. These runs are the best possible ones I could salvage from the absolute shit show that was my playthrough of In the Shadows, and you're going to find that most of these situations you can only approach with trial and error. That and a hefty application of save scumming, because good grief, is it no fun to get rumbled this late in the level and end up having to play it all over again from the start. If there's one thing that genuinely irritates me the most about In the Shadows, though. It's the fact that the stealth alcoves don't work, and these are supposed to be places that only you can see and only you can access. This thing, right here, that I'm fighting in right now, and I'm pretty sure they're intended as safe spots, places you can hide out, places where you can let your amulet recharge without fear of discovery. And it's a neat idea. It'd be a really neat idea if it actually worked, but unfortunately, no. It's just something that you're gonna have to risk every now and again. Sometimes enemies ignore that section, sometimes they just run in and hack your face off. Sometimes you get a little further than you anticipated, only to discover that a dimensional shambler comes out of the damn teleporter just when you think you can end the level. Did I mention this is supposed to be normal difficulty? I think I did. Either way, it's comprehensively bullshit. I think you'll forgive me if I do the rest of this on easy modo. So if you're wondering what the difference is exactly between easy and normal difficulty, it comes down to quantity of enemies in a level and also a reduction of certain enemy types. So for example, the shambler that I ran into at the end of the first map on normal difficulty, that goes away completely on easy, and the difference is pretty big. Significantly so, to such a degree that I could almost imagine there being another difficulty sandwiched between both easy and normal. You know, just a little something to make the difference between the two feel a little less like whiplash. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we'll see any such changes anytime soon, because if you cast your eye over to the ModDB page for In the Shadows, you'll discover that the last update post for this particular mod was in 2013. What's especially heartbreaking about this is that the update post itself listed a whole slew of improvements that were planned to be added to In the Shadows, including significant updates to the stealth system itself, the author admitting that it's currently quite rough around the edges and not very forgiving to new players. Improvements were going to include a new axe that actually changes its look depending on what stealth status you're currently in. Enemies were to receive an indicator showing you the best angle to attack them from, something that was providing me a little bit of trouble in the current version. New sounds, new effects, new enemies, in fact, so much stuff that it leaves me faintly concerned that everything just seemed to stop after that particular update post, so I hope at the very least the author is still okay. But overall, despite the roughness, despite the frustration, despite the damn difficulty curve, the idea behind In the Shadows is still extremely fascinating to me. It's something that I'd love to see future installments of, and I'd love to see this evolve into something that feels really satisfying to stealth your way through. If my harping on about difficulty settings earlier had you wondering about hard mode, fear not, I was just as curious as you, terrified in fact, to discover what fresh hell hard mode would unleash on me, and the truth is, hard mode isn't really too far of a stretch above normal difficulty. Sure, there's the additional enemy placement here and there, such as the guard right at the start of the level here, but for the most part it boils down to certain enemies being upgraded to the tankier, more deadly versions. To be honest, I can only imagine these changes making much difference to the player who's just ignoring the stealth mechanics altogether and playing it through as a standard Quake level. So yeah, all I can really do is shrug my shoulders on that one. I was secretly hoping for shamblers on every corner, abominations patrolling the sky, but alas, 'twas not to be the case. Regardless, I still feel that In the Shadows is a fascinating project. Clearly, a lot of the elements are still very rough around the edges, and there's a lot of frustrations to be had, especially if you're thinking that normal is going to be anything approaching forgiving. But if this has piqued your interest, you can find the link, as usual, in the description below. Just maybe play it on easy first. While I'm at it, I'd like to give a great big thank you to my wonderful, awesome patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so very much for your support, and thank you for helping to make content like this possible. If you fancy lending a hand yourself and you'd like to join the esteemed ranks of these cool dudes on screen, you can find the link to my Patreon page also in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mod you'd like to see me cover in future episodes of Doom Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus, Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.